Yeah.
How do you then well, I'm going to talk about this in two facets of your images. So first of all, it's going to be the process. Well, I want to talk about the logistical and physical process because I know it's interesting to me, but I know it's interesting to many people out there. How do you go and get these images? But really more important for me, I want to dive into it, is how you go about thinking of a story, how you go about creating that story with the camera, with you, with connections. And we talk about film photography allows you to be more present. Is that a conscious decision, or was it an evolutionary decision? But talk to me about those two kind of sides of your images and your projects, and the art that you put together. Talk to me about that process, and then talk to me about the storytelling. How you go about telling a story and creating a story.
Good question. Thank you. I'll try and begin with the first part and then we'll evolve into the second part. And I'll take you and your listeners on the creative journey I'm on at this moment today. Not necessarily sitting with you, but I'm manifesting a project in the Middle East. The working title, I don't think it will be the title, it's called The Souls of the Sand. I think most of the books I make are fairly ambiguous titles because I don't want to be specific, before they pass away, between the sea and the sky. It's more about a sort of poetic, artistic interpretation of a subject. So when you refer to the Middle East, often you think of religion, you think of economy, you think of anger, fear, hate. I think the Middle East has been more documented than any other part of the world in the last 40 years. But there's only one form of documentation that comes out of there. I want to invert that narrative. I am traveling on a regular basis to a variety of countries between the Stans and Morocco, it's the greater Nima. And I'm trying to retell a narrative. I'm trying to look for indigenous, authentic culture that still exists, to make a picture, to tell a story that's a positive as opposed to a negative narrative. And as I said, this part of the world, I'm just been in Yemen on the border of Saudi, and I'm going back there again next month, and I'll explain what I'm doing. The only images and only stories we've had from that part of the world are negative, ever since I can remember. The narrative that I'm going to tell is something very different and experiencing as a result. So, a part of this greater story, I wanted to visit some tribal communities on the border of Yemen and Saudi in the Asir region in the far southwest, right down in the corner. You straddle the border, so you're working in Yemen. I've never been there before. The only narrative and information I have is online, which is negative. Don't go. So how I normally go, so I go anyway. When they say don't go, that's the first thing. I go everywhere they say don't go. I go on my own, and I go with no cameras. So I was there last month, went with a little backpack, and I did take an iPhone with me, and I went on a 2-week journey, 2.5-week journey, right the way down, just as a tourist. And I went to see, to see, is what I read on the internet the real story, or is there something else going on? I discovered what I knew was there, didn't make any pictures, had a variety of conversations and said, can you help me if I was to come back on my own with cameras? And this is what I would like to do. I obviously took copies of my books with me, and it's basically a 2.5, 3 weeks conversation. The answer was yes, and we will look after you, and we understand what you're trying to do. So I'm going to go back again next month. I will go on my own. I've got a small team on the ground going to meet me, a translator, a guide, a couple of tribal leaders, and I will turn up with a lot of kit. It's always a bit of a struggle getting there. 10x8 camera, probably about 10 boxes, about 10 sheets, so it's 100 images, tripods, backgrounds, reflectors. I only use ambient light, never artificial light. Gear. So it's probably about 100 kilos.
Wow.
50 of that kilo I carry as hand baggage, because I've got to get on 4 different flights. I could write a book about that one day, how you travel around the world with 50 kilos hand baggage. It's fun. It's an art into itself. We could have a whole other podcast if you want to talk about that.